Games Workshop just gave the Aeldari their biggest model refresh in decades. New Phoenix Lords, updated Aspect Warriors, a complete overhaul of kits that have been around since the 90s, Asurmen, Fuegan, Baharroth, and an entirely new Phoenix Lord nobody saw coming, Lhykis, the Whispering Web. The Fire Dragons, Swooping Hawks, and Warp Spiders all got brand new plastic kits. It's the most comprehensive update a Xenos faction has received in years, and GW is promoting it heavily. February 2025 marked the return of the Aeldari to prominence, after being neglected for so long. Except this isn't a celebration, this is preparation. GW doesn't invest this heavily in a faction's model range unless something major is about to happen in the lore. And for the Aeldari, there's only one major event left. Their extinction. The lore has been building toward this for years. The Aeldari are a dying race, and they know it. Every Craftworld seer has foreseen the end. Every soul that dies goes into the Infinity Circuit, feeding Ynnead, the god of the dead, while Slaanesh waits to devour anyone who doesn't make it to their spirit stone. The Ynnari emerge specifically because the traditional Craftworlds aren't enough anymore. Ivrain preaches that awakening Ynnead fully is the only way to save the species, but everyone forgets what that actually requires. Complete awakening of Ynnead means every single Aeldari dies. Their souls merge into the Infinity Circuits, form a god powerful enough to fight Slaanesh, and maybe if the prophecy is real, the species gets reborn somehow. That's not survival, that's collective suicide with optimistic branding. JB refreshed the Aeldari model line right before they're about to kill them off in the narrative, and it makes perfect business sense. You can't have a dramatic faction-ending event if the models look like they're from 1994. The Warp Spiders especially needed updating. Those old metal kits were ancient even by Warhammer standards. Now they're gorgeous plastic with dynamic poses and incredible detail. Same with the Phoenix Lords. Asurmen got a total redesign that captures his role as the first Phoenix Lord while looking modern enough to sit next to any current release. Fuegan and his Fire Dragons are centerpiece quality models. These aren't minor touch-ups. This is GW saying we need people to actually want to buy and paint these models before we blow up their entire faction. Look at what happened with Age of Sigmar. When GW ended Warhammer Fantasy and transitioned to AOS, they made sure the factions going away got their moment. The End Times gave every major faction a climactic last stand before the world literally exploded. The High Elves and Dark Elves merged into the Lumineth and Daughters of Cain after the old world burned. That's the template here. Refresh the models, give them updated rules in a strong codex, let people get excited and invest in the army, then pull the trigger on the lore event that fundamentally changes or eliminates the faction. The Craftworld Aeldari are getting their victory lap, right before the finish line drops them into oblivion. The timing lines up too perfectly with other narrative developments. The Great Rift tore the galaxy in half. Ynnead partially awakened during the Gathering Storm events when Eldrad tried to force the process early. The Ynnari formed and started recruiting from every Aeldari faction, Craftworlds, Drukhari, even Harlequins. Biel-Tan shattered. Multiple Craftworlds are on their last legs, barely holding on. The lore has been systematically dismantling the old Craftworld structure while positioning the Ynnari as the future. And now GW gives us beautiful new aspect warrior res and Phoenix Lords right when the narrative is screaming that the traditional Craftworld way of life is doomed. They're not celebrating the Asuriani. They're giving them a proper funeral. The new codex supports this reading. 8 detachments, including Ynnari and Harlequin. Options. The rules emphasize speed and tactical flexibility through the battle focus mechanic. The Phoenix Lords are powerful but not game-breaking. It's a strong book that makes Aeldari competitive without making them dominant. That's exactly the kind of send-off you'd give a faction before a major narrative shift. Make them fun to play, give them their moment in the spotlight, let the community engage with them positively, then transition them into whatever comes next. GW learned from the end times backlash. You can't just delete factions without giving players something they're excited about first. What do you think happens to the Craftworlds when Ynnead fully awakens? Do they disappear entirely, or does something worse replace them? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The Phoenix Lord releases tell the story themselves. We got 4 new Phoenix Lords at once, plus Lhykis, who didn't even exist in the lore before. Karandras is the only original Phoenix Lord who hasn't gotten the plastic treatment yet, and that's suspicious. He's currently missing in the lore, disappeared during recent events. If GW was planning long-term support for traditional Craftworld Aeldari, they'd have given him a model alongside the others. Instead, he's conveniently absent, which reads like narrative setup. When the Craftworlds fall and Ynnead awakens, Karandras stays missing, because his story doesn't continue into whatever the Aeldari become next. The Phoenix Lords who got new models are the ones who matter for the transition. The community response has been overwhelmingly positive. People are excited about Aeldari again, after years of neglect. New players are starting armies. Veteran Eldar collectors are finally replacing their ancient metal Phoenix Lords with modern plastic versions. Sales are probably strong, but that excitement is exactly what GW needs before they make a major narrative change. If the Aeldari were still neglected with outdated models, when the lore event happens, players would be furious. Now, when the Craftworlds undergo their transformation or extinction, the community has fresh models they're invested in. Those models don't become obsolete. They just represent the last generation of the old Craftworld way before everything changed. Eldrad's ritual at Port Demesnus nearly worked. He tried to prematurely awaken Ynnead by channeling every Craftworld's infinity circuit simultaneously. The Deathwatch stopped him, but Ynnead partially awakened anyway. That's where the lore currently sits. A god of death halfway to consciousness, waiting for the final push. The Ynnari believe they can complete the awakening, using the Kronzords, without sacrificing every living Aeldari. That's the 7th path Yvraine preaches. But prophecy in 40k is never straightforward, and the Aeldari have a long history of their plans backfiring catastrophically. The most likely outcome is that the 7th path fails. The original prophecy was right. An awakening in Ynnead requires exactly what it always required: the death of every Aeldari. GW has been systematically updating old factions before major lore shifts. The Death Guard got a massive refresh right before they became a major player in the Plague Wars. Thousand Sons got new models before their role in the Siege of Terror books. Necrons got a complete overhaul alongside their expanded lore role in the Indomitus era. Now the Aeldari get their update, and their major lore event is the only one that's been foreshadowed for literal decades. Ynnead's awakening is the Chekhov's gun that's been sitting on the mantle since the Craftworlds were introduced. GW is finally picking it up. The alternative interpretation, that GW is just supporting the faction with no major lore event planned, doesn't track with how they operate. They don't invest this heavily in model refreshes for factions they plan to leave static in the narrative. Space Marines get constant releases because they're constantly involved in major events. When a Xenos faction gets this level of attention, it means something big is coming. For the Aeldari, the biggest thing that could happen is the event they've been building toward since the fall. The final death of the Craftworlds and the birth of whatever comes after. That doesn't mean Eldari disappear as a playable faction. It means they transform. The Ynnari already exist as a distinct sub-faction. When the Craftworlds collapse and Ynnead fully awakens, the survivors join the Ynnari, and that becomes the new Aeldari identity. Your Phoenix Lords and Aspect Warriors don't become invalid. They're just veterans of the old world, champions who survive the transition. The models stay relevant, the army stays playable, but the lore undergoes a fundamental shift that closes one chapter and opens another. It's the same strategy as killing the old world and launching Age of Sigmar, except this time they learn to bring the models and players with them into the new paradigm. The Aeldari model refresh is beautiful. The sculpts are phenomenal. The rules are strong. Players have every reason to be excited. But don't mistake this for GW suddenly caring about xenos after decades of Space Marine focus. This is them setting the stage for the Aeldari's narrative endgame. They're making sure the faction looks good, plays well, and has community investment before they pull the trigger on the lore event that's been inevitable since Slaanesh was born. The Craftworlds are dying, Ynnead is waking, and GW just made sure everyone has gorgeous new models to remember them by when the end finally comes.